Navy, and from defense both on all this BS fighting on the plain of Jaws and all, and the highest estimate is to the casualties is 150. That Laotian thing is absolutely impossible. It's a whole lot worse than beating on. There are some of these Vietnamese, after they beat them over the head, it'll go in there and fight. But Laos is an impossible situation.
Well, you heard Senator Russell, folks. We got some problems here in Laos, and we're going to use this F-100 and my wingmans to solve it. Mission for the day is simple. Navy's lost a jet, and we need to go knock out some AAA. That way, some Air America helicopters, who have nicely volunteered to help us out, go in and get this guy without being shot to pieces. At least that's the plan. So, whether that happens or not on this sortie, we're going to find out together. Just an interesting comment to make as I'm flipping the switches to turn on the F-100 here. This is actually a pretty easy plane to turn on once you get the hang of the startup checklist. I know some people tend to shy away from turning planes on when they're cold and dark, but again, the hunt is pretty straightforward. You don't have to mess with waiting for like inertial navigation systems to align. You don't have to wait for like the black boxes to all talk to each other. You don't have to download anything or run a data package in it, or you don't have to worry about any of that complicated business with this airplane, being that she's a very straightforward 50s era plane. So all you got to do is turn the jet on, flick the necessary switches to turn the jet on and get the electrical system going, check the hydraulics, and it's pretty much good to go from there. So it's a refreshing change from having flown like the F4 for the last 2.5 years and, having to wait for Jester to do his part, wait for things to align, and do all that malarkey. Taxiing is surprisingly easy on this plane, too. The F4, you have to hold down the nose wheel steering button if you want to turn, and that little habit has been screwing with me in this plane, because in the F-100, you just press the button one time, like a civilized configuration. So I thought it was so strange when I first started flying the F-4E how the nose wheel steering had to be held down anytime you wanted to turn, and I was like, why don't you have it where you just press the button and then you just turn, like the way the F-100 does it? And I've gotten so used to it now that going to this airplane, I'm now holding it down unintentionally, which is causing issues. So software, personal software, what a beautiful thing, right? So back taxiing down here as we get ready to take off from quote-unquote Da Nang. Let's get a look at the F-100. She's an elegant bird, and with that canopy at half position, just look at it. The Granelli team have done such a good job of modeling the F-100 in all its 1950s Jetsons glory. It's unfortunate, but just the nature of technology and modern aerodynamics means we will never see an airplane designed like this again. And it's a little sad because there's just something about a 50s jet like this that really evokes the kind of kid-friendly, fighter jets you would design when you were a child, and, someone said, hey, go draw a fighter jet, and you'd probably put something on the paper that looked pretty similar to this. And now with our computer-aided design and radar cross-section minimizations and diverterless inlets and, slate gray, all slate gray designs, we've kind of lost the time period where fighter jets were artistic. And it's a little sad, but such is progress. So get ready to line up here. We're going to learn some pretty interesting lessons about air power in some of these upcoming sorties with the F-100, because we don't have any electronic or guidance assistance tools at all in this jet. There is a A4 an automatic bombing mode in this, but I've tried it and it doesn't seem to work too much differently than just dialing in the mills and hoping for the best. So that's the approach I'm going to go with. We've got 750-pound bombs, a 20-millimeter cannon, which is the loadout that the F-100s who actually flew this mission in Laos in 1964 did. So yeah, no JDAMs, no MFDs, no GPS coordinates, no punching some numbers in and the bomb magically arriving, no laser guidance, no Wizzo doing the hard work. It's just me, the gun sight, and TLAR bombing. And TLAR bombing in the F-100 consists of that looks just about right. We'll be keeping the radar warning receiver off because we don't have to worry about SAMs today. The threat will be AAA, and trust me, that is plenty stiff enough for competition today. Let's get ready to run the engine up and get the jet ready for takeoff. Take one more look at this really elegant jet. Again, Drendel did a great job modeling this airplane, and can't wait to see some of the custom liveries that people come up with in the coming months and years. This thing just looks so cool. The audio design is also top-notch. You can clearly tell that they got really good footage of a real airplane running, because that engine sound, you can't synthesize that. It's just chef's kiss. Let's let her rip. Special note when taking off, when you see the jet yaw, correct with the rudder, just like you would on landing. If you try to correct a yawing motion on takeoff with the stick, you'll induce the same adverse yaw reaction that'll happen if you move the stick on landing, and the results are going to be expensive and very explosive and probably fatal for you. So again, stick to the rudder when you are at low air speeds, especially on takeoff and landings. Taking a moment here, admiring our wingman's jet and his Hogwarts payload suspension system under the wings. As I understand it, actually this was an issue that was a problem when I flew the sortie. Drendel has since patched that in the latest DCS update, so you all should not be seeing this when you fly your sorties, but just wanted to point that out because at the time, yeah, that was a little weird, just looking over and kind of thinking my eyes were being weird. I'm like, is he really flying with no he's got weapons but no pylons? And sure enough, the only pylons he has under the wings right now are for the 335 gallon tanks. So we're cruising up here. It's kind of these long sorties. The full sortie is about 2.5 hours, and there's just it's kind of interesting getting into the mindset of the people who did this for real, because in the multiplayer world, you know, you're jumping in the jet, you're taking off, you're instantly, more or less, like within a few minutes of getting in your hot started plane, you're in the air and you're doing something, right? You're bombing, you're flying to a target, you're getting in a dogfight, you're doing something. And then you do the thing, you fly back to base, and maybe you fly back and land without any issues, but odds are you're going to get jumped, or a wingman's going to get into a dogfight, or you'll spot somebody and try to shoot them, or something's going to happen, right? And it leads to an experience where you're always engaged in doing something, and that's not bad, to be clear. I'm not trying to knock multiplayer, but there's something to be said for doing it the way the real people did it, and it gives you a chance to really explore like the headspace of the veterans who really flew this jet in combat, just like the ones that did in Laos in June 1964, which is just doing the research for this sortie was just a mind-opening thing. Folks look at what the U.S. does in places like Iraq and Iran, and it's like, oh man, what's going on? And it's like, folks, if you crack open the right history book, you'll see that this has been a thing for decades. So airstrikes of dubious legality are nothing new, and the F-100 happened to participate in that in one of the first airstrikes of what would later be called the Southeast Asian/Vietnam War. As we fly north along the coast of quote-unquote South Vietnam, we're now getting to the turning into the combat zone. Taking a moment to admire those beautiful kill marks. Grinelli's modeled a mechanic. Those who don't know, they've modeled a mechanic with the F-100, where in single player, your ground and air-to-air kills are modeled on the jet fly with tally marks. So as you do things in single player, the tally marks on the side of your plane will show air-to-air kills, which you saw on the left side, and air-to-ground kills, which you're now seeing on the right, although it really should be the other way because we're looking at it from reverse in the camera. So yeah, pretty cool little feature there. Tell the wingman to go into trail since we're getting ready to kick the tires and light the fires here. I've already dialed in the bomb settings. The plan here is we're going to make a dive bomb pass on one of the southernmost AAA emplacements. That way, when the helicopters go to pick up our guy, that will be one less battery that will be attacking them, because our Navy pilots are located to the south of this site. And if we kill the guns that are nearest to where the pilots are, we can theoretically protect the Air America helicopters better as they affect the pickup. So, lining up here for the shot, getting ready to do the business. Again, when you do these long sorties that are structured the way the real pilots did it, you get these periods of just flying in and, an hour or so flying in, getting ready for the 15 minutes of terror, and then you got the hour and a half back. Kind of interesting when you fly the long sorties. You get to appreciate the jet a little bit more, and again, step into the mindset of the people who did this for real. When lining up, be careful to use the rudder when you're at the top of the turn. Otherwise, you might still depart flight, just like you will if you use a stick at the wrong point in landing below 200 knots. I gave the automatic bombing mode a try here, but I don't know. I don't think it worked too terribly much better than if I had just T-lard it. That looks about right. Far as I know, there are no publicly available tables for M117 bomb delivery in the F-100. If anyone happens to have a line on that, feel free to drop a link in the comments. Obviously, if it's still classified, don't freaking do that. This isn't War Thunder. And even if it is if you are in War Thunder, don't share classified information, folks. It's just not cool. Coming back around, so the thing about flying the F-100 from newer stuff is that you just have to take a little bit more time to do what you're used to. So in something like a F-16, F-4, something that has big afterburners, you can turn and burn and fly really quick and come back around. In the F-100, you just gotta take a little bit more time to get around. It's not a big hindrance. In actuality, taking more time to come around and make another pass is actually a good thing. It gives you more time to change your settings, evaluate your pass, and make a better one on the next. Plus, this is a good point to note that the F-100 is also significantly more efficient with fuel than many newer airplanes, right? Because the F-100's engine is relatively fuel efficient relative to newer stuff like the F-100 and the F-16 and the F-110 and the F-14 and the J-79 and the F-4. A lot of these newer airplanes just burn gas a lot more, especially when you're doing tactical stuff. So if you're out of the afterburner in the F-100, you are burning fuel pretty conservatively, as you can see there. So you've got some more gas to work with when it comes to passes, whereas with something newer like an F4 or an F-16, if you're flying a realistic sortie like this, you might have 1, maybe 2 passes before you hit bingo. Because the F-100 is that much more efficient, you get a few more opportunities to hit the target. The trade-off is, of course, it takes more time to complete each pass. So you give in one area and you give up in another. That's pretty much the story of aviation, right? If you want more in a given quantity or a given metric, you have to accept less somewhere else. Just kind of how it goes. But we are doing some damage, so there is that to consider, and hopefully that'll make it easier for the Air America people to do their mission of getting our Navy guy back. Checking the bomb settings here. Ew. Black. Definitely not friendly skies today. Watching while 2 does his thing. Gonna clear him since he's hit his primary target. I'm gonna have him now engage the AAA until he's bingo. Even though 2 is a digital creation, obviously, I do feel a bit of responsibility for his life here, so I'd like him to come back alive and in one piece. For this next pass, I'm going to set the dial and the mills for a gun pass, and hopefully the M117 that is still hanging off on my right wing can be get close to the target. I'm not sure why the M117 on the right wing didn't come off. Maybe my theory is that maybe I just didn't hold the pickle button long enough for the command signal to trigger the drop, but flying the Sabre with 750 pounds on the edge is a very tricky proposition. Got some good hits there. Finally cleaned off that bomb, so we're a lot more maneuverable. Bear in mind that there are asymmetrical store limitations on the Super Sabre, and those warnings are in the manual for good reason, because with 700 pounds on one end and none on the other, it makes handling the airplane that much more, shall we say, unstable. Turning the jet to go down for the lineup on that pass was a bit dicey. Had to be a bit more gentle on the rudder with that, or I would have easily departed. Because that bomb on the end of that wing would have just tilted the airplane in an uncomfortable and an unstable direction. So just bear that in mind when you're planning your loadouts. Don't asymmetrically load the airplane at all if you can help it, or you're going to have some complications to deal with. Check the fuel state there. Always a good thing to do on any sortie. Well, shit. I realize that number 2 in this is, you know, he's a digital creation in a video game, but it still hits hard to see this because, A, being a veteran, I know people who have not come back from missions, which is not a good feeling, just period. It's not something that really comes to words easily. And 2, it hits harder knowing that this story was the reason a lot of names are on the Vietnam Memorial now. I visited it some years ago, and I can tell you that seeing all those aviators' names on that wall, it hits different. It hits a lot different than seeing a picture or going to, you're seeing a documentary about it. When you see the memorial and you know that this is exactly how a lot of those names wound up on that wall, it hits different. And yes, I know this is a game, but it also deserves acknowledgement and respect to point out that what you just saw is the fate of many husbands, brothers, and friends and loved ones. Just like that. We're going to make good on that. 2 might not be coming home, but we're going to make sure the enemy pays for it today. Line up and get ready for this last gun pass here. Some careful jinking as we come off target. Trying to conserve the fuel here, so I'm staying out of afterburner. Good thing about the Sabre is she's still maneuverable without needing to be at like Mach 0.8 or something. Even at 200, 300 knots, as long as you're mindful of your control inputs, you can maneuver the jet pretty carefully. Not carefully, but you can maneuver the jet in a relatively carefree manner. Interesting note I'll make too about navigating in the F-100D. We don't have any MFDs or GPS in the jet. Moving map consists of whatever paper map you move into the cockpit yourself. So flight planning, distance planning, and knowing how far away you are from your navigation waypoints is very important. And understanding your landmarks and what the world outside looks like as you move from place to place is very key when flying this 50s jet. So we're following the river out to the east, because that's going to be how we're navigating back to base. So something I'll touch on in later videos about how to navigate in the F-100, because it's not terribly, it's not very difficult, but it is something that you need to do carefully or you will make mistakes, just like the real life pilots did when they flew these in combat. More on that in videos to come. So after finishing the sortie and cruising back after about an hour, we're going to make a right turn and come on into land. Got some haze happening here, courtesy of Atmos X and its realistic weather implementation. So props to that developer for building the mod. Thank you guys for your comments on the ejection seat. I did map that, and I would recommend that you do so as well, so that when you're lining up to land, you can just raise your seat and lower your seat as the situation best fits. So being able to raise the seat has made landing a lot less tricky in terms of the glide slope. So lining up to land, same protocol as before. Make sure you're using your rudder for fine corrections. It's a little unnatural because 99% of the time in other jets you're using the stick to do it. In the Super Sabre, she likes the rudder. Got a little bit of a War Thunder flashback moment here. Not sure why we got a bunch of trees on the approach path to the airport, but we'll have to deal with that. Modify the approach a bit, come up a little bit, and then bring the stick down. Flare it a bit. Bring back the power. Little right rudder. Done. Pull the drag chute. Apparently there is a bug where the brake modeling is a little wonky. Apparently the brake fade and smoke animation is a little too aggressive at this point, so even if you land and use the brakes normally, the jet's gonna basically just poop out its brakes, because the animation and the modeling is set up so that even if you use a normal amount of brake force, you're gonna roast them. So at this point my brakes are basically dead, and I'm kind of like, what the heck did I do? Because, you know, as far as I can tell, I didn't even really touch the brakes that much. I was careful to modulate them, like just use a quarter, not even a quarter brake, and they gave out pretty much at the end there. So that's one of the items that's on Grinelli's to-do list, and after checking the forums, I think that's something that they are working on fixing. So again, props to them for being on the ball with monitoring community feedback and getting changes to the aircraft as we test it out and fly it. It's a lot better than many developers have done in DCS's history, so that is worth extending some props to. If this happens and you land fast, or you cook the brakes for whatever reason, just wait, give them time to cool off, and once you've resumed brake effectiveness, you can taxi where you need to taxi. It just means you'll have to sit on wherever you land until things cool down. Take some time here to appreciate the F-100's visual aesthetic. Check out those kill marks on the right side of the jet, just under the canopy. Again, I like how they're implemented here. They're pretty low-key. They're there. You know, if someone calls it out, you can see it. You know, if you know, you can see them. If you don't know, you probably will easily miss them. But it's not like War Thunder, where basically all the stickers just look hilariously oversized in proportion to the airplane. I know you can adjust them a little bit in the special options menu in War Thunder, but even with them kind of down in size, it still, to me, just looked a little overkill. So seeing these implemented, again, relatively low-key is kind of nice. And I'm glad the Grinelli team included not just air-to-air, but also air-to-ground, which is a pleasant surprise. So after the brakes cooled off, got the jet turned around, and now we're taxiing back. The F-100's pretty easy to taxi. You just set the throttle at probably about 75-80%, and then just tap the brakes whenever you're getting just a little too quick, since the brakes are a bit more responsive than the engine is. Flipping some switches here to get her ready for shutdown once we park. So yeah, first realistic sortie in the books. Lost the wingman, which unfortunately echoes the reality of what happened in reality on many of these AAA support missions in Laos. And that was tough to see. So as we taxi back, I'll recap some of the housekeeping items. First, obviously, this is not Vietnam. There is no Vietnam map in DCS, and based on comments that Wags made to Andre Celesti on the How I Play channel, good interview. I suggest you check it out if you've got a few hours to burn somewhere. He outlines, among other things, that the technology of DCS's platform just can't handle a realistic Vietnam map, because the tree and the terrain logic would probably just melt most normal people's computers. And from what I can see of Mariana's and how that runs on my machine, I think that assessment is uncomfortable but also accurate. So we'll have to wait until Vulcan before we get a realistic Vietnam map. So for my sorties, we'll have to go with South Atlantic, doubling as, in this case, Da Nang Air Base. And for the reconnaissance airplane that was shot down, we had to use, or at least in this case, I used a Grumman A6E Intruder in place of the RF-8 Crusader reconnaissance airplane, which was actually used in Laos on the 7th. The date on the caption is the 8th because that's when the report made it to Washington, and that was the source that I used. So if there's any confusion on some things saying the 7th, some things saying the 8th, that's probably why, just because of the locality of where the particular source was written. If it was written in Asia, then it'll potentially be a day ahead or behind, depending on when the faxes, or not faxes, when the teletypes and the documents were prepared. But anyways, again, coming back to the housekeeping on the reconnaissance aircraft in question, we used an F-8 Crusader for the, or used an A6E Intruder in place of the RF-8 Crusader, since of course there is no RF-8 AI model in the game, nor is there a full feature model, which I hope that'll change, especially because the F-100 seems to be pretty well received, and an F-8 is about similar in terms of technical capability. It's basically the Navy's version of this type of single seat, single tail, gunfighter type platform. So hopefully a development studio will take up the challenge there, and we'll see the F-8 and its iterations in the game. And yeah, so you'll also see some substitutions in upcoming videos. The F4 will be used in place of the RF-101s in upcoming videos, which will be, my intent is to have a series of F-100 focused sorties that are going to illustrate the jet's combat history in multiple theaters. We're going to start with Vietnam because I obviously have more access to sources there, and we're going to start from basically day one of when the lead flied, which is in this case Laos in 1964, and we're going to take it all the way to the 1970s when the F-100 was pulled from Vietnam, just because of the age of the platform and the logistics of keeping it going and the general drawdown that were happening in the late 60s, early 70s as well. So you're going to see this jet go from its missions in Laos all the way through Rolling Thunder and the close air support roles that it had up until 1970 when it was withdrawn. So stay with me, stay tuned as we make more videos in the channel showing this jet's operational history in realistic sorties, set up as realistically as we can. And hopefully you guys like this, and if there are parts of it that you don't, feel free to let me know in the comments so I can roll those improvements in upcoming videos. Thank you all for tuning in. We just crossed 1,000 subscribers in the channel, so I am very grateful and thankful for everyone's support of what I'm publishing and the work here, and kind of taking a moment here and showing off the E6B computer that they put into the airplane. It's like an old school slide rule based computer for figuring things out. Pretty necessary when you've got a 50s jet like this, so good thing to see. But coming back to the important stuff, I'm very grateful for everyone's support. Thank you all for subscribing. If you are not a current subscriber to the channel, consider subscribing so that you'll be notified when I publish my next video on the F-100 and other subjects. So stay tuned. Next one will be the F-100's first interdiction strike in Southeast Asia, which will be the June 9th Joint Chiefs of Staff ordered presidential directed retaliatory strike on Laos once again. So we'll be going back and doing some more communist killing in upcoming videos in the Hun. Thank you all again for tuning in. We'll catch everybody in the next one.